Falken. I'm the Special Advisor for Infrastructure and Sustainability at the U.S. Department of Education. You may have wondered where the Federal Education Agency is on facilities. It's actually a question I get a lot. While the U.S. Department of Education isn't authorized the same long-term dedicated infrastructure programs at some of the other federal agencies we're going to hear about today, we are working to think creatively about school infrastructure, sustainability, and health, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. In particular, we're trying to do a better job of promoting some of the federal resources that you will hear about because, of course, the relationship between state education agencies is with the federal education agency more so than the Environmental Protection Agency or the Department of Energy. So we're trying to bridge that gap and help to promote the various exciting funds that are coming up. Before we engage my colleagues on the panel, I want to offer a little bit more background on Eds Role, including some opportunities for your districts to get involved. So you think back to how we have local control of schools in this country. It's an expression you hear a lot. Think of how little involvement some states have in your school facilities matters. In some states, there's completely no funding offered whatsoever. In some states, there's some grant programs available. Well, the federal level is a kind of a step back where we have not been authorized a widespread facilities role at the federal agency yet. We've seen how important it is for there to be someone at our agency with advocating for your concerns with an interest in facilities. So that's kind of my role. And remembering that Ed is historically a data collection, civil rights, federal student aid agency. We've not had the strong role of a lot of my federal counterparts, but you'll hear a little bit more about that in a few minutes, a little bit more about the state of our schools. I do want to touch on two Ed-specific facilities-related efforts, and one of them is the big elephant in the room that you've heard about so many times, these ESSER funds, $122 billion to support a wide range of pandemic response and recovery efforts with facilities as an allowable use. And then I also want to talk a little bit about our, of course I forget my slides, our U.S. Department of Education Green Ribbon Schools Recognition Award, which is important because it connects built and natural environment with learning and health. So while Ed doesn't have the dedicated facility funds with widespread applicability like some of the agencies you will hear about shortly, our COVID recovery funds that are administered at Ed, we call the U.S. Department of Education Ed because Department of Energy got the DOE first. They're unique in that they're the first widely available funding at Ed that has as an eligible use facilities improvements. Now, there's a lot of details about that funding on our website. I don't want to go into a lot of it. We are going to hear some examples from our panelists in a little bit, but it's important to know that time is running out to spend them. And like Wanda said on the panel this morning, you want to spend every penny. And I hope a whole lot of that goes to facilities matters because it's a really great use for those one-time funds. Moving on to the second thing I want to cover with you before we get to our panelists, because of a 2011 public request with widespread support, our primary path at the Federal Education Agency into facilities has been through this recognition award. You may have heard of it. It's called U.S. Department of Education Green Ribbon Schools. It's not focused on one aspect of a sustainable school like indoor air quality or efficiency. It's not a certification, it's recognition only, and it takes a pretty comprehensive approach, which I'll go into in just a minute. It's important, and a lot of times this is overlooked, because for over a dozen years, it has allowed our agency kind of a hub to build out to talk about facilities, a place to where there previously had been no role for facilities at the U.S. Department of Education. At the state and district levels, the award brings school facilities into the mainstream of education, and it encourages some of the key collaborations needed to successfully administer the federal funds that we're going to hear about. So because this award has been so pivotal to our engagement on facilities, we are really eager to have strong participation from all states. We actually currently have about half of states participating. You can play a role if you know of a district that's doing good sustainability work or a school within your district. You can play a role in asking your state to nominate. A few things to know about the award, and I'll go really quick because I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty. You apply to your state education agency, so you don't apply to the federal education agency. They nominate you. Schools, districts, early learning centers, and post-secondary institutions are eligible. The deadlines vary by state. States all nominate to me by a given date. It happens to be in February, but your deadline in your state is going to be different in each state. As I mentioned, the award takes a pretty comprehensive approach to sustainable school, and it's important because I think it's one that's likely in sync with your definition of a safe, healthy, fiscally responsible, educationally appropriate facility, where students learn by the most hands-on and active means, including using their buildings and grounds as a learning tool. You can see there are 3 pillars of the award: reducing environmental impact and costs, that's everything waste, water, energy, transportation. Improving health and wellness includes a comprehensive school environmental quality program, everything from indoor air to contaminants to pest management to cleaning, as well as outdoors physical activity and nutrition. And then finally, our 3rd pillar is the learning pillar. So it's all green careers, outdoors, active, environmental learning, and they fit together quite nicely. We honor the schools undertaking this all of the above approach, showing progress in each of these areas. So it can't just be one area, it has to be all the above. Of course, progress looks different for each school, so they don't have to be brand new constructions to win this award. Again, it's not a certification. We're really just looking to highlight a few examples each year and excite other schools and hopefully inspire them to adopt some of the same practices. Speaking of all schools advancing, I want to highlight a resource website we put together through the partnership of the Center for Green Schools at the U.S. Green Building Council. You'll hear from Anisa, my colleague, in a moment. Greenstrides.org is a great place for all schools to find some tools to move toward the 3 pillars of our award. And we tend to post a lot of the grant opportunities like the opportunities you'll hear about in a moment on the panel. With that background, that quick background, I want to get to our panelists to learn more about the state of our schools, other available federal funding, and then how this looks in implementation. So I'm going to start with Mike Pickens right next to me, who is the Executive Director of the National Council on School Facilities. That's the Association of State Facilities Directors. Mike, could you describe what we mean by a gap on facilities funding?
Thank you, Andrea. It's a pleasure to be here. What is the gap? Well, first of all, I'm Mike Pickens, as Andrea said, the Executive Director of the National Council on School Facilities. We are a nonprofit organization located in Washington, D.C., and we are made up of state school facilities officials across the country, some territories. We support states in their varied roles and responsibilities to equitably deliver safe, healthy, and educationally appropriate public school facilities that are sustainable and physically sound. So what is meant by the gap that this presentation is talking about? And let me start out by saying, in many cases, I think a lot of the folks in this room are local school districts. In many cases, our local school districts are having difficulties navigating through the available federal funding opportunities that you're going to hear about up there. What we want to do at the council, we're made up of state folks. We want to be a resource to our local folks, to be somebody that you can go to help you navigate through this funding opportunity that you're going to hear about. Okay, so I don't want to deliver the doom and gloom here, but let's kind of talk about what it is that this gap that we're talking about. Okay, what we know that there's about 14,400 roughly public school districts in our country. There's about 18,000 if you talk about charter schools and private schools, parochial schools, and that type of thing. We have about 100,000 students, 100,000 schools, 50 million students, 8.1 billion square feet We are the second largest capital outlay, second only to highways. So you see the enormous volume that we have in our school system across the country. Okay, this is what we also know. We also know that there is a $57.4 billion gap in capital improvements in our school system. There's a $27.6 billion gap in M&O, maintenance and operation, for a total of $85 billion gap. Now, what is a gap? Well, that gap is the difference between where we need to be as a school building to deliver the maximum education delivery that we can. That's where we need to be. And then the difference between where we need to be and where we are, that's the gap. And I'll be happy to go in more detail about that, but this slide talks about the M&O. Capital outlays, there's about a $57.4 billion gap. Maintenance operation, there's a $27.6 billion gap. Total of 85. Here's capital improvements I just mentioned. Now, here's something interesting. Of the funding sources that we have for our school systems across the country, 77% of the funding for capital improvements or capital outlay comes from our local folks. 22% comes from the states. Only 1% comes from the federal government. So anytime we get an opportunity here from these good folks who are going to tell you how to get this money, we need to take advantage of this. So I don't think it was doom and gloom that much, but I wanted to explain to you. If you have any questions how we came up with that gap, those numbers, be happy to talk to you about that after the panel discussion. But in a nutshell, that's where we are.
Thanks, Mike. Anisa, at the department, we still don't have data on how ESSER funding is being spent. When we do, it will not provide a lot of detail on school facilities uses. So how are you seeing, with your work in districts across the country, ESSER funding being used in projects?
Yeah, we've seen a real narrative out there that you guys have probably also seen about how ESSER funding is being spent or not spent at school districts, and it's really hindering our federal advocacy efforts. We do a lot of work advocating to Congress for funding for school facilities, and when you have news stories about a school district in one place that did a football field, it really messes with the narrative. So we've done a lot of work to try to figure out where school districts are who have been spending the ESSER dollars on facilities in really big ways. So not just purchasing filters or some of the smaller stuff or incremental stuff, but really big projects, and trying to profile those projects. So we put out this new report today, brand new, that looks at a data set that exists from a company called Burbio of 5,000 school districts with about 80-something% of the ESSER dollars sort of accounted for there, about their plans for the rescue plan ESSER dollars, so ESSER 3, and where they're planning on using it, and what sort of buckets are being talked about. And then we looked at which districts seem to be spending a lot of money on facilities and not, and then pursued those districts to try to get their case studies of those districts during the summer when they're all really busy. So we got 3, and we're working on some more. So major findings, school districts, the facilities category of spending for the ESSER $3 is the second highest behind staffing. So districts really are investing their ESSER dollars in facilities and HVAC. They also, we're also seeing that more smaller school districts are spending this money, and they're spending a higher percentage of their ESSER dollars on facilities. That really checks out. I mean, we were kind of looking for that, and I'm glad it showed up because we know that small school districts are putting a lot of the ESSER dollars into facilities because they don't have other sources for these facilities improvements. And that checked out in our case studies as well. The case study districts all said we would not be able to do these projects without this money, and we can't get this through bond funding in our community. So that is also happening. So they're also, small and medium districts were also spending more per school. So they were doing bigger projects within this data set than the larger school districts from what we can tell, unless the large districts are just doing very few large projects within their portfolio. So one of the ones we profiled was Colorado Springs. They allocated a huge portion of their ESSER $3 for air filtration, HVAC, and heating and air conditioning. So, around $500,000 per school on average went to this category of funding. And they made the point that they can't get this volume of funding, this level of funding for schools very often, and so they really wanted to put it into some major projects for their school district. And we asked them about results, and they they've already been able to see some of the results from their HVAC and facilities projects on COVID prevention, which is exactly what the funding is intended to be used for, but it has all these other corollary benefits, like everywhere they upgraded HVAC in a major way, they also saw reductions in energy usage, even with some of the measures they were taking for COVID. So we saw some really, really positive results from these case studies. I have another one I might share later too, if we have time.
Great, thank you so much. So we move from exciting new research findings to some of the exciting new funding. Andrea Swiatocha is a program analyst at the U.S. Department of Energy, and she's gonna tell us a little bit more about what new Department of Energy funding and support is available to school districts for efficient and healthy schools.
Excellent, thank you, Andrea, for the introduction. My name is Andrea Swiatocha. I'm with the Schools and Nonprofits team within the Department of Energy. Just want to pause. I know it's post-lunch. Everyone's awake, right? I'm offering money, so wake up. This is your opportunity to learn about the next steps, okay? The biggest one is first, but we have a couple different things that I want to share with you. So back in October, just a couple weeks ago, Department of Energy released our notice of intent to announce that we would, in a couple weeks, here the end of November is our target, release the first tranche of the $500 million. We're anticipating releasing around $80 million that would go to energy improvements. And there's a couple different topic areas. I'm going to share more in the upcoming slides. But this is really exciting. This is the first time the DOE has directly funded schools. I think it's important to note that this is going directly to the local school districts. This is another question we get. This is not going to the states to then administer to the local school districts. This is going to you all in the room. So get excited.
Yes.
I know, right? Thank you. Full disclosure, I'm coming from a local school district and just transitioned to DOE. So I am very passionate, very excited about this. And I know that $500 million doesn't get us far in the $85 billion deficit that wasn't, too depressing, Mike, when you presented it. But it is a great start, and we have to start somewhere. So like we said, the grant will be a competitive grant. There's a bunch of different options in terms of qualifying improvements, but think of them as improvements, repairs, renovations, anything that reduces energy costs. It could be related to HVAC, to lighting, to your envelope, to roof. It also includes renewable energies, also includes infrastructure and the actual purchasing and leasing of alternative fueled vehicles. Eligible entities, again, almost everyone in this room, it is going to the local LEA or a consortium. So you could choose to partner as the LEA with a nonprofit or for-profit. And prioritization, we're really looking, which I know all of you are in need, but think of your schools that are in most need. That's the group that we are targeting. Your specific schools that have high free and reduced lunch. We're also interested in schools in the rural areas, and NCES codes them specifically 41, 42, 43. That is an actual bill provision language, so we're also targeting that. Obviously, it is still open to all urban school districts too, but that is a priority for us as an agency. And we're also looking for you all to leverage this. Think about other private sector partnerships, your local bond and state bonding capacities. So how can you make this an even greater and bigger project and sort of combine that funding? One of our goals with the grant is to really facilitate that substantial additional investment. And we're, again, just like I emphasized on the last slide, really trying to prioritize schools that have the highest needs. You all probably have schools in your CIP that are coming up. Think of the schools that aren't in there. I know you all have them. I know I had them as another, right? There's always more projects that you need to do. That's the type of schools we're looking for. We're also looking for ways to minimize the administrative burden. Federal grants are not a small submission. And most of you probably haven't done them. They're not something that schools tend to apply for. So once the grant comes out, it's really important. There will be an informational webinar. I encourage you, it's not a requirement to attend, but I would encourage you to attend. I promise we'll try not to bore you in it, but it's important that you understand all the requirements that go into it. And we're trying our best to not make that a barrier to anyone to submit. And we're really also looking to build enduring capacity within the LEA. So how do we maximize the money? Again, even though it's maybe not the $85 billion that we're looking for, it is still a good chunk of money. And how do we maximize that to the best of our ability? We're looking for innovative, replicable, scalable projects that we can develop as case studies that we can share out and work with other school districts. In the NOI, there are 2 topic areas. So take a look. Again, the NOI is already published. There's high impact energy efficiency and health improvements. And topic area 2, which is more of your renewable energy option, we're referring to it as the innovative energy technology package.
NOI meaning notice of intent, meaning that this grant is coming soon, is the federal lingo for the Department of Energy, in case you did not know it. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you. One other option, an opportunity that I want to share with you all that is separate from that, is something called the Energy Class Prize. This will fund 25 LEAs, up to $100,000 in cash prize, to fund an energy manager. That could be split over 1 person, 2 people. It's completely up to you. But that individuals in that school system will be able to attend training and receive one-on-one coaching all around energy management. So we're really excited. We know that, we heard earlier this morning, right, that capacity is an issue. We hope that this helps support that barrier that's out there. So this will also open with the grant that's coming out in a few weeks. It'll be completely separate submissions. Make sure you go to the herox.com website, but it's another great opportunity. As you participate, and once those 25 have been selected, there will be an additional cash prize at the end with some additional submissions for an additional $50,000. And the third option doesn't come with the money, but I still want to share, and it's really something we're really proud of at DOE, is the Efficient and Healthy Schools campaign. So this is led by the Department of Energy, but provides technical support through the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, one of the DOE labs, as well as in partnership with Department of Ed and EPA, and we appreciate their partnership in this. This campaign aims to improve energy performance, reduce carbon emission, and promote a healthy learning environment in schools. It provides technical support as well, so I encourage all of you to register. You can either be a partner or a supporter. So for those that are not school districts in this room, you could also be a supporter of this. We just launched last week the 2022-23 campaign. There was a soft launch last year. We didn't widely publicize it as we sort of got our foot under the ground, but certainly publicizing it this year. There are 2 tracks, the energy efficiency plus health and the emission reduction and resilience. And within that, there's a planning track and an implementation track. Everything is posted online with applications, and the timelines, they are different depending on whether you want to do the planning or implementation track. And really excited, there's webinars that happen probably about once a month, but there'll be several in the winter and spring. We had a kickoff one last week. I believe the recording is online, so you're always welcome to go back and listen to that as well. And sort of the last steps for you sort of summarizes the call to action. And I would encourage all of you to read the notice of intent that is posted online. Feel free to go to the DOE, our schools and nonprofits webpage and sign up for updates so you'll get notified when the actual grant is posted, or we refer to it at DOE as a FOA. It's a funding opportunity announcement. Within the NOI, for those that are maybe not an LEA in this room, but a vendor or partner, we are encouraging a teaming partner list. There, we will update it every week. As of this morning, there are about 40 partners listed on there. So if you're interested in being a partner, school districts have the ability to see your name and information and what you do. For those that want to be a partner, make sure you read the NOI and submit the required information via email so that you can be added to the partner list. Make sure that you go to the HeroX website and follow the challenge. And don't forget about the Efficient and Healthy Schools campaign. It's a really great opportunity both to be recognized for your work and then also receive that technical support.
Excellent. So we're learning the whole alphabet soup of federal acronyms now. We move from DOE, Department of Energy, to EPA, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, where we're going to hear from my colleague Becky Cook-Shyovitz, who is the Healthy Schools Coordinator there, helping to really swashbuckle the bureaucracy. I like to say there are a lot of programs, a lot of offices at EPA that have programs related to schools, and sometimes it is overwhelming at a smaller agency like ED, the Department of Education, to handle all of their various requests, and I've been so grateful to work with Becky. Becky, what EPA funding is available to school districts to support efficient schools and fleets and to support school environmental quality? I know there's a lot going on. We heard about bipartisan infrastructure law funding at the Department of Energy, and now we're going to hear about some more bipartisan infrastructure law as well as IRA funding, Inflation Reduction Act funding over at the EPA.
Yes, thank you.
It's the whole alphabet soup.
And I'll add in American Rescue Plan funding, which we also use to support healthy schools. EPA is also considered a smaller agency. We have a smaller budget. And historically, we haven't had a lot of funding for healthy school buildings, but thankfully over the past 2 years or so, through recent legislation, EPA has received historic investments, and a lot of that money can go toward healthy schools. So I'm going to start with air quality. Over the past almost 3 years now, air quality has become a hot topic, but I want to step back. In addition to reducing the spread of COVID, air quality can help you reach your primary goal of educating students. Nearly 1 in 13 school-age children has asthma, which is the leading cause of school absenteeism. And there's substantial evidence that indoor environmental contaminants, many of which are common allergens in schools, can trigger asthma symptoms, which ultimately impacts student and teacher performance and attendance. So onto funding. The Inflation Reduction Act provides $50 million to support improved indoor air quality in schools. This is $37.5 million for grants and other activities to reduce air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions in schools. We're thinking, our initial reading of this is that this part will be for outdoor air quality. And then there's $12.5 million for technical assistance to schools to address environmental issues, develop environmental quality plans, and mitigate ongoing air pollution hazards. And again, our initial reading is that this will be more focused on indoor air quality. So unfortunately, I don't have any details about this funding. It's all very new, but look for it over the next few months. And it's very exciting. I mean, this has never been heard of before at EPA. We also have a wildfires grant coming out. There's going to be a request for applications in February. This is a brand new $4 million grant program for wildfire smoke preparedness in community buildings, and schools and LEAs are considered community buildings. EPA held 2 stakeholder feedback sessions in October to help craft the RFA and define eligible activities. We're anticipating that they'll include abatement of wildfire smoke hazards in schools, things like installing filters, retrofitting your HVAC system. But again, this will all be laid out in the RFA in February.
And the RFA was what, really quick?
Request for applications. That's what we call our grant application.
It's different.
Why we can't have the same, who knows?
School buses, another huge pot of money we'll talk about more in a minute. And then I wanted to talk about technical resources and guidance. Again, because EPA has not historically had a lot of funding for schools, we have tried to plug the gap a little bit by at least providing guidance and trainings to you all. So, of course, indoor air quality tools for schools. Hopefully you're all aware of this. You probably all are, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. It's a suite of trainings, checklists, guidance to help you support and develop indoor environmental air quality plans for your schools. This is at epa.gov/IAC-schools. Energy Star, again, you probably all know, but it helps you save money by improving energy efficiency, and the secondary benefit of Energy Star is that you improve the indoor air quality, thereby reducing your asthma triggers, increasing your student and teacher attendance and performance. An analysis for the state of Washington showed that you can reduce absenteeism by as much as 15%, and you can save up to 30% on your annual energy cost by implementing some Energy Star best practices. We also have schools as community clean air and cooling centers. This is, EPA is using American Rescue Plan funding. We provided technical assistance to 4 communities, 2 school systems and 2 counties, I believe, to address the risks of increased wildfire smoke events and extreme heat days in school buildings. EPA is providing guidance to improve ventilation and filtration, things to do like how to make your school a clean air center, on how to keep your school open on extreme heat days and when there's wildfire smoke. The 4 communities are holding workshops over the next few months, and we anticipate releasing some guidance or toolkits or something that other schools can then use more broadly if they want to pursue similar programs in your school districts. And finally, there's the Clean Air in Buildings Challenge. EPA is providing general actions and recommendations to improve indoor air quality and reduce the spread of disease within schools and buildings. So EPA is seeking comment, this is the request for information, RFI, by December, on actions, strategies, tools that you use or would like to see to improve indoor air quality and mitigate the spread of disease. And related, you can visit the White House Clean Air in Buildings page and sign the Clean Air in Buildings Pledge. This has 4 key commitments: creating an indoor air action plan, optimizing fresh air ventilation, enhancing air filtration and cleaning, and engaging the building's occupants. So, Clean School Bus Program. You may have heard we had a few recent events on this, and it's all very exciting. So the Clean School Bus Program will improve air quality, reduce greenhouse gas pollution, and better protect children's health for the 25 million American children who rely on school buses every day. Diesel air pollution is linked to asthma, again, causing students to miss school. So phasing out diesel engines will ensure cleaner air for students, as well as the bus drivers, your staff who work the loading and unloading zone, and the communities through which the buses drive. So this program will transform school bus fleets across the United States, making with clean, zero-emission school buses. So in October, EPA just announced the awardees selected to receive nearly $1 billion from the FY22 Clean School Bus Rebate Competition. Given overwhelming demand from across the country, EPA actually nearly doubled the amount of awards. We had planned to give out $500 million. We ended up giving out $965 million. And these will fund new electric and low-emission school buses across the country. This was made possible through the bipartisan infrastructure law, which provides $5 billion over the next 5 years for the Clean School Bus Program. So EPA looks forward to announcing the next round of funding in the coming months, which will include another grant competition as well as another rebate program. And we expect to make another $1 billion available for clean school buses in FY23. Switching gears, we're going to talk about water, which is our other main source of funding for school buildings. As you probably know, there's no safe blood lead level for children. Lead exposure leads to impaired growth, reduced attention span, hyperactivity, and learning disabilities, which all get in the way and make your jobs harder of educating students. So we have our WIN program. This is Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation. There are a few different grant opportunities, but for schools, the main ones are reducing lead in schools and child care centers. EPA just announced nearly $10 million to 3 awardees for this program. It's a State Department of Health, a school district, and a nonprofit that will work with school districts to fund lead remediation efforts. This includes replacing, removing, installing lead solder pipes, plumbing, faucets, water fountains, installing water filling stations, point of use devices, or anything else that a school might need to get lead out of drinking water. We will have another RFA in 2023, probably in the spring. I don't have an amount yet, but the bipartisan infrastructure gave EPA $500 million for WIN programs over the next 5 years. So we do anticipate having additional grant competitions in FY23, 24, 25, and 26. Related, we have the State Voluntary School and Child Care Lead Testing Reduction Grant Program. This is a non-competitive program where EPA gives the money directly to the states, and the states then run their own process. So each state does it a little bit differently, but again, this is non-competitive money that you can use to test your schools for drinking water. And I know in the past, some schools have actually turned this money down because they said, well, if we test, how are we going to repair it? We don't have the funding to do that. So the good news is that Bill expanded the program to allow for remediation. So now you can test, and if you find lead in your drinking water, there's a money attached that you can then remediate. You can change the pipes, install, change your faucets, install water filling stations, whatever it is that you need. And so Bill has provided $200 million for this program over the next 5 years. Resources, again, you're probably all familiar with these, but we have the 3 T's toolkit. This is a communication and training toolkit for training school officials, testing drinking water to identify potential lead problems, and taking action to reduce lead in drinking water. And then we have this potential funding sources document. This was an interactive guide to help schools find even more money. So it includes a couple of federal programs, but also 79 state programs that you may be eligible for, as well as 115 foundations and companies that provide funding opportunities related to drinking water in schools. So finally, I wanted to put a plug in for the Office of Children's Health Protection website. It's epa.gov/schools. Our intent here is to be a one-stop shop for all EPA-related programs, EPA programs related to healthy school buildings. You can look up information and guidance by topic. So we've talked about air and water. There's also, asbestos and PCBs and mercury contamination. There's school siting guidelines if you are creating a new school building. There's a model school environmental health program, which goes from no and low-cost steps you can take to mid-range cost things and then higher investment options, to help meet schools where they are, whether you're just starting to think about environmental health programs or whether you already have a plan in place and are looking to level it up. There's sensible steps for healthier school environments. This is a focus on cost-effective and affordable options, and it has a school assessment checklist. And then we're planning to release a new page here in December on funding opportunities. So I think, like Mike mentioned, it's very hard to, if you're a school district looking for federal money, you have to go to the Office of Air's website, and then you have to go to the Office of Water's website. So we're trying to continue the one-stop shop, create a funding page where we will list all EPA programs with money available for school buildings. So stay tuned for that.
And Ed is trying to do a better job of promoting all of these funds that you've heard about from the Department of Energy and the EPA. To wrap us up and move on to our discussion portion, I'm going to pop back to Anisa for some more examples. This time I will remember to introduce her, although Anisa Hemming requires pretty much no introduction. She's the director of the Center for Green Schools at the U.S. Green Building Council, a huge champion of school infrastructure and specifically sustainable schools. Anisa, for our last question, before we go to our discussion portion, we hope to have some questions from you all. We tried to leave some time for that. We've heard a lot about funding opportunities that increase efficiency and promote health. Can you give us an example of how school districts are investing in projects that are in line with these funding opportunities?
Yeah, I wanted to pop back because the EPA, you mentioned having a one-stop shop site. I know the Energy Act of 2020 required the DOE to have the same thing, right? So you guys have a web page with all the energy efficiency funding available for schools. So just so everyone knows, agencies are trying to put it all in one place for you. So don't do that. Don't do that rabbit hole search yourself. Go look for those pages that have it all. The schools that so the Center for Green Schools supports and trains people who do sustainability work in school districts. So if you have like an energy manager or a sustainability director or somebody like that at your school district who's not already connected in to the free network that we run, please come find me because it's a great resource and there are a couple people here who participate in it. And it's free, and that's our mission, is to support those people doing that work at the school system level. And so we hear a lot about the choices they're making about this funding and the difficulty they're having in the decision making around how they're going to leverage the federal funding and how they're trying to spend the ESSER funding by the time frame that it's supposed to be spent by and in the amounts that are there. So one of the other case studies that we had in that paper was, is there anybody here from Maryland? So if I butcher this name, are you going to? Yeah, Maryland. Do you know this county? Wacomico? Okay. In my head, it's Wicomico, because I think that sounds funny. So, Wacomico. Okay. Thank you. Voice from the back there. So they're doing this great job investing in a huge percentage of their allotment. They're a sort of relatively small district, sort of 20-ish. It probably says, 24 schools. And they're spending 63% of their ESSER 3 allotment on facilities-related work. And what we heard from them was that they had been doing a lot of capital planning over the last few years, and they were just ready. So they had all this stuff outlined in their capital planning, and they saw this money come, and they said, we gotta jump on it because we're not going to be able to pass this through our local community. We don't have this kind of money in our local community to do this kind of work. So they really grabbed on to the opportunity to do projects that were going to improve air, prevent COVID transmission, and improve energy efficiency. And so they've been doing a lot of this work out there. And they have seen those results for the fund, from their use of the funding. And we know that this is happening all over the country, and we're wanting to profile more districts for conversations with lawmakers about additional resources to provide through agencies, for instance, to school districts. $500 million, not a lot through DOE, but it is the first time that the federal government is providing that kind of funding directly to school districts. It could happen again. It can happen more. And we could help that happen if we have the right kind of stories of like really effective usage of that funding. And so we're trying to make sure that we capture that information so that we can make that case. Because there are many districts out there that can't do this work without help from either the state or the federal government. They just don't have the tax base in their community. So,
Awesome. Okay.
is there a slide after this that I should?
I don't remember. There is a slide after this, and it's perfect.
That's the cue.
We wanted to allow a significant amount of time for discussion and any questions you might have. I know it's a lot to take in. There's a lot of federal funding and it comes piecemeal. That is not because we're trying to be difficult or create a puzzle for you, but it's just how legislation gets stacked upon legislation, just that, like in your states, we get a little program here and a little program here, and so that's why we are then needing to create websites that unify all those various programs in one place for people to access them. It's not intentional to be complex, but I think the net change here is that we are seeing more federal funds for school infrastructure over time. We're seeing more federal support, which is unprecedented certainly in my time at Ed, but over the years of Ed, well before me, there's never been federal infrastructure funding quite like now. So what kinds of comments or questions does this group have? And we'd love to hear also how the federal government can be more helpful to your facilities efforts at the district level.
Trying to figure out, where we can use ESSER funds, and there's that kind of it's a very fine line of what oversteps what we can do and what we can't do. That's really becomes part of our capital projects and not really part of what ESSER was intended for. But that line seems to move as we get closer and closer to deadlines that we seem to be pushing the envelope. But what are some areas that we thought originally, we always talked about HVAC, we talked about windows, we talked about doors, those types of things that would take care of the envelope and all. But now we're pushing it a little bit further to do other things. What things can we still do, but yet that you were going to say are absolutely off the table? Don't try it because you will get rejected through an audit type things and stuff.
I think this is a really interesting question because a lot of the interpretation is being left to states. And a lot of the communication from Ed, the U.S. Department of Education, was initially it must relate to the prevention, mitigation, the spread of COVID, right? But if you look more closely, and I'm like Wanda earlier today, trying not to lose my job in what I say, but I think it's really important. I'll let Anisa at some point jump in here, but I think it's important to note that the actual statute language, because of the way ESSA is written, it allows for all facilities uses, doesn't it, Anisa? Would you say that's
well, it's the
not all,
right?
anything, but it more broader than COVID specifically, and that is the thing that has been tricky, and it's been hard to get the federal government to communicate that more. I would have preferred that Ed had more vociferously communicated earlier that it's not just so tightly related to COVID. And I would encourage you to advocate in your district, in your state, for broader uses related to just generally healthy, safe, educationally adequate schools, because I think those should stand a fair chance. But there is a lot of, because states are grantees from Ed and then districts are sub-grantees, a lot of the interpretation happens at the state level. And for better or worse, the guidance from the beginning was very focused on COVID, despite my efforts to make it less focused on COVID.
I mean, it is the purpose of the bill, right? So the purpose of the bill was for COVID prevention. We are seeing like in different states, different things are being approved, unfortunately, because it's very confusing to everyone. But look, one of the examples I showed was in Wicomico. They did like HVAC improvements, really like full-scale HVAC replacements, and they implemented things like VRV, in those schools, and that is just part of the work that they needed to do on the HVAC system. It doesn't directly relate to COVID, but it is sort of like a corollary benefit. But in addition to some of the things that you mentioned, there's also some districts are using the funds for some space shifts in how spaces are used. So like they're adding some space if they need to have the ability to keep kids a little bit more spread out.
Outdoor learning spaces.
And then outdoor learning spaces, is the other really big one that we've seen. So those kinds of it's not just about the quality of the air, it's also about trying to keep people healthy by giving them a little distance, and the ability to, in the future, mitigate against some of the stuff we had to do in the schools for COVID, which is allowing schools some flexibility in how spaces are used.
Yeah, Craig Schiller from the Collaborative for High Performance Schools. Two-part question. I think the word one-stop shop was used 3 times. It was actually 3-stop shops.
3 stops shop.
And I want to ask, so one part is from the federal side, how do you all as agencies all collaborate with what you're doing? Because we have, again, 3 stops, all focused on schools. And the second part is, for the room of practitioners like this, can you talk about the process for the needs of the practitioners, how that gets put into funding at the federal level for bills?
I think the collaboration is getting a lot better. It's come a long way, and we talk at least every 2 weeks, EPA, Ed, DOE, and the White House. Every 2 weeks minimum, but we also have that's all of us. We have a fair number of bilateral conversations as well on these topics. So I'd say it's getting a lot better, but some of it is historical and just kind of unwinding the mess of programs that exist in lots of different places. Would you say?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Andrea has taken a real leadership role in that. So
Trying to make sure, because I understand that schools and school districts should not have to go to 3 different stops. So we're trying to figure that out. It is hard at Ed because we don't have a lot of funding in the realm of facilities. We did propose an Office of Infrastructure and Sustainability at Ed for fiscal year 2023, and I'm hoping that we get that. That would be unprecedented for us to have a formalized, my role is not institutionalized, so to formalize some capacity at Ed to work with states and work with federal partners on facilities and hopefully help to cut through some of that federal bureaucracy and make it easier for all of you to access the funds you need. We did start a newsletter quite a few years ago now. It's up to 55,000 distro, and I aim to, every time one of these guys has a new announcement, it's in that newsletter. So if you're not signed up for that, it's on the Green Ribbon page on ed.gov/green-ribbon-schools. And that's a great one to get because I really promote EPA and DOE stuff. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question?
It's a legislation question. I can touch on it if
Yep.
you want. So the question was how does the practitioner lens get to people making legislation? And it doesn't. But no, it takes advocacy groups that are trying to hear what's going on and then bring it to congressional leaders. Unfortunately, it's kind of like not kosher for the agencies to do that. So, like DOE, when they were putting together the workings of the $500 million grant program, we helped get the voices of districts for that program design. So after the funding was passed, making sure the program was designed well, but the fact that the funding got passed in the first place, it takes groups like the National Council on School Facilities, our group, other sort of nonprofits and associations that you guys might be a part of, speaking up on behalf of school districts. And so if we don't hear what's needed, then sometimes the congressional leaders don't know what's needed, and then we get really stupid programs passed through Congress.
If you have input, the National Council on School Facilities and the Center for Green Schools are great places to provide that because then they can advocate, and they advocate in conjunction with a number of other organizations. It's not just the 2 of them, the BASIC Coalition, so various associations of groups that are interested in ensuring healthy, safe, sustainable, educationally appropriate school facilities. And a lot of times you guys on the outside can have more impact than we can. Like Anisa said, we can't just go to the Hill and say, hey, that's not a great program and here's why. It's a little more complicated than that. But we are, I would say, the coordination among the federal family and then with the nonprofit family, we work together all the time. It's not just EPA, DOE, Ed. We also all talk to Anisa, Mike, and quite a few other organizations all the time to get input. Hey, what makes sense? What can we do to be helpful here? And partnering in many ways, like that website I mentioned, one of 3 stops.
I would just add one other, Anisa and I both touched on it, but working with you all to create these great case studies. That is how we get the voice out that, again, can't express it enough while we are very excited about the 500 million. We need to show what great projects we did and what the impact was of that. And we are going to need to work with everyone in this room and across the country to tell that story and to share that voice. And it's so impactful to be able to expand and to grow that program.
And the same thing will be true for ESSER, and that's going to be even trickier because we're not set up to collect data regarding facilities. But yet, if we want to get more money that supports facilities, we have to be able to show that it was well used the first time.
We have time for one more question right over here.
I'll be quick. I just wanted to vouch for everything that this powerhouse panel is saying. I'm a sustainability director for a large district, and my school district has improved in our healthy school environment because of these teams, because of these resources. We have truly taken advantage of them. I can't stress to you all enough, take advantage of these resources. This is a group that does what they say they're gonna do. And I wouldn't have a lot of the funding, new staffing, resources, taking advantage of ESSER if it weren't for these programs. Thank you.
Well, that's an excellent way to wrap things up. That's great. And so, listen, thank you. This has been an excellent discussion here. Thank you all so much for contributing. Excellent.